So CNN ironically released an expose today that further confirms, if you couldn't already tell, that Alex Pretti, the man who was shot by Border Patrol agents over the weekend and started all of this outrage and chaos, was not actually an ordinary peaceful protester or random citizen who found himself in the firing line of immigration agents for no reason, as liberals tried to claim. As a matter of fact, we're talking about someone who is a serial leftist agitator that just the week before found himself in a physical altercation and fight with ICE agents after he tried to engage in similar behavior and even broke a rib in the process. And yet, for whatever reason, the very next week, with some strange thoughts in his head, decides to do the same exact thing, except this time around bring a loaded 9mm handgun, and you know the rest of the story. Why does that matter? Because number one, I think the intention, if you want to speculate what he was there to do, is certainly relevant. But secondly, here's what's arguably most important. You're talking about a situation that, yes, I agree, should have never happened to begin with. You know why? Because the week before, he should have already been placed in jail. That's something that would have happened, likely, if Minneapolis police either did their job up until 2 seconds ago and stopped handing over control of the streets to this anarchy and the mob behavior, or secondly, perhaps, I know they're going to call us authoritarian, but hey, probably should have just been arrested by federal agents to begin with, but you know how all of this stuff goes. So I want to bring you this story here today, and again, show you sort of the full context of who this individual is, because these details are extremely relevant. Keep in mind, this is another person that is being crowned as a liberal hero. This is exactly how Democrats want their voters to behave, and I think that information is something that should be kept in mind. We'll tell you all about it. We'll show you what even President Trump has to say about it in Iowa here tonight. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all the latest news and coverage. And that said, take a listen to what we're now learning about who Alex Pretti was. Again, not just some normal guy who ended up here for no reason.
Pretti had a physical encounter with federal agents about a week before he was shot and killed by law enforcement. Sources tell CNN that Pretti broke a rib when a group of federal officers tackled him while he was protesting. Priscilla Alvarez is breaking that story for us. What else are you hearing, Priscilla?
Dana, we're learning more details along with my colleague Jeff Winter about what exactly transpired a week before Alex Pretti was shot in Minneapolis and died this past weekend. Now, in this earlier incident, he stopped his car after observing ICE agents chasing what he described as a family on foot and began shouting and blowing his whistle. Pretti later told one of these sources that 5 agents tackled him and one leaned on his back, appearing to leave him with a broken rib. According to this source, and I'm quoting here, that source said, quote, "That day he thought he was going to die." Now, Pretti was later given medication that is consistent with treating a broken rib, according to records reviewed by CNN. Sources also say that he was known to federal law enforcement, though it's unclear whether it was this incident or another with federal agents that they knew of him. It's also unclear whether the officers who tackled him on Saturday knew who he was. What we do know, however, is that federal immigration officers have been collecting personal information of protesters and agitators within the context of what the Department of Homeland Security has warned is repeated threats towards officers as they are conducting immigration enforcement operations. In fact, just Tuesday, the department also publicized an online tip form to share information about people allegedly harassing ICE officers. We've also heard Tom Homan, the White House border czar, say that a database would be created for those who are arrested for impeding law enforcement, but thus far in our queries to the Department of Homeland Security, they have said that no such database exists.
Unbelievable. There's a lot more to peel back there. Thank you so much for bringing us that news, Priscilla.
Okay, so let's review those details here. First and foremost, we know it was not the first time that he showed up to an active crime scene, a dangerous situation, with the intended goal, with his whistle, getting in their face, of impeding federal law enforcement, which is highly illegal, and hence why I'm going to repeat this. He should have been in jail already. You want to talk about a situation that never should have had to happen? I totally agree. Number one, Minneapolis police should have all along been separating the quote-unquote protesters, aka leftist agitators and domestic terrorists, from the Border Patrol and ICE agents as they conduct their operations, because that's a basic public safety thing, regardless of whatever you think personally about the deportations. But then secondly, had that rule of law been enforced, this guy would have already been either in prison, on some type of bail, probation, restraining order, so that way he doesn't go on to repeat the same dangerous and illegal behavior the very next week. Secondly, obviously in that moment, I don't think that, Border Patrol or either side has time to discern each other's intentions. It's just a case of, hey, self-defense or not. But if we want to kind of delve into what was his motive, what was he there that day to do? He obviously did show up with a gun, and technically he did have a concealed carry permit, but many things about what he did that day actually were illegal. He wasn't even carrying an ID and all that. But okay, if you want to speculate on his motive, right? He said the week before, apparently according to these sources, after that whole situation with ICE, he thought he was going to die. Then he decides the very next week, after, being in a very scary situation, he thought, he should have died that day, whatever, to go do it again, and this time do it again, bringing a gun. Obviously, at this point, we can't just ask him what he planned to do with that gun. But again, you want to kind of further delve into this theory. He seemed like he was there up to no good. I think his intentions likely were a lot more than to just, quote unquote, peacefully protest. I think that detail is actually very relevant if you want to litigate this even more. Again, none of it really matters in the situation legally of, hey, Border Patrol. What do they see in that moment? He had a gun. They're screaming gun. There seems to be potential evidence now that the gun might have accidentally discharged. We showed you the footage of him reaching for the holster and pulling out what appeared to be his extra magazine in that moment. It all happens too fast, right? There was a reasonable fear for their life. There's a reason why Border Patrol agents acted in self-defense there, but okay. All of that said, if you want to kind of do the post-litigation thing where we ask, what was he there to do? Did he have peaceful intentions? Actually, the evidence right now that CNN is releasing, maybe to make Border Patrol look bad, I'm not exactly sure, seems to suggest the opposite, right? Seems to suggest he was kind of this crazed person that, got some type of thrill, or he had something of a wish that he wanted that to happen, what he wanted to be a martyr, whatever. I don't know. Just more details to keep in mind there. And then lastly, you're talking about someone who was already on a government watch list intended for individuals who are engaging in threats and dangerous behavior against federal agents. And then he does what? Proceeds to show up that day carrying a gun and engaging in the same exact behavior that apparently just broke his ribs the week before. Doesn't seem like a very normal behavior, but it does seem like that of what's the very organized insurrectionists and agitators that we're really dealing with here in the streets, right? It's not just a peaceful protest movement organically coming from normal citizens. No, these people are highly organized and highly sinister, as we've been trying to tell you.
Is this a pullback?
I don't think it's a pullback. It's a little bit of a change. Everybody in this room that has a business, you make little changes. Bovino's very good, but he's a pretty out there kind of a guy. And in some cases, that's good. Maybe it wasn't good here. But you have to understand, when I watch some of the people that I've been watching over the last few weeks, these are paid insurrectionists. These are paid agitators. These people aren't normal, like OG, that, they're incensed about anything. How do you get incensed when you go into a state and you're taking criminals out? You're taking monsters out, murderers. We had 11,888 murderers let into our country by other countries, by Biden with his open border stupid policy. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You talk about bad policy. Open borders where people were coming, so the whole world, the Congo, Venezuela, all over the world, they're letting people in from their prisons and they're feeding them into the United States. And they're murderers and they're drug dealers and they're everything else you can think of, every bad name you can think of. And they let them in by the millions. We closed the border. We have nobody coming into our country anymore.
You do know they're paid agitators, right? They're paid. They get paid. Do you ever see their signs? We used to have protests and you'd have guys making a sign in a basement. These are all paid agitators. That's all they are. They get paid to go and they don't even know when they interview them, why are you here? I don't know. They have no idea. They're paid insurrectionists, really, in some cases. They're sickos.
So look, I think the fact that all of America can agree on is that this situation shouldn't have happened, and ones like it, likewise, should be prevented from happening. But the why is very important, right? The why is not because federal immigration law shouldn't exist. No, rather, first and foremost, in this particular case, you're talking about someone who should have already been in jail to begin with. But hey, even on non-immigration related matters, this is a story we see time and time again from liberal cities. It turns out that a lot of America's problems are being caused by repeat offenders who already have gotten themselves in trouble with the law, but for the sake of looseness or criminal justice reform, they're let out of jail, they're released back onto the streets due to no cash bail, or they downgrade it to a misdemeanor, or they drop the charges altogether, and then this is the situation you get. It turns out when people are showing you exactly who they are the first time, you should believe them. But on a wider picture, I'm sure you've also likewise heard a lot of conversation recently about ICE potentially changing their tactics, right? As we speak, Greg Bovino and Border Patrol are being pulled out of Minneapolis. Tom Homan now is in charge of that operation. What's that going to mean? Here's what I want to say. Is that I think clearly, given everything you've seen in the past few weeks, but arguably for the past year, ever since this started, let's remember it's not the first time. We know about Portland, we know about Los Angeles even before it, that it's time for ICE to change their tactics, right? But again, the why is very important, and so is the how. So what do I mean when I say ICE needs to change their tactics? Well, I think that we basically now, despite whatever temporary agreement or concession you get from Tim Walz or Jacob Frey, understand that as it currently exists, as we kind of do this publicly and say, here's Operation Minneapolis, we're going to send ICE to Minneapolis, they're very publicly seen across the city, that when you do things as you're currently doing, you're going to get left-wing agitators and domestic terrorists who basically will stalk you around the city, swarm you, and then that's how these situations happen. And by the way, they're doing so with full coordination and assistance from the state government, who either engages in it themselves, check those signal chats, by the way, and in the cases where even they don't, the police will stand by and basically allow all of these scenarios to happen. Now, you can sit there and scream at the Democrat states, but I mean, realizing that's kind of not working, right? Every time we ask, hey, can law enforcement just do their jobs? Look how hard that was to get to happen in Minneapolis. We need to understand, right? The Democrat states are not playing ball, and yes, these people will act like terrorists and they will chase ICE agents around in the streets. So as I put there, what's the solution to that? Well, honestly, there's two options. Number one, you could go all the way and invoke the Insurrection Act and just start mass arresting the agitators in the streets. But if you want to say that's too far, America's not ready for that, it's the authoritarian option. Okay, here's my then, I guess, pragmatic political solution as I put here. The answer is that ICE needs to actually start operating like the secret police that liberals think they are, right? And what do we mean by that? As I put here, there's no reason that liberal activists should have any clue anymore where ICE is, much less have this ability to immediately text their little signal chat and get hundreds of protesters to immediately start swarming them, harassing them, and ultimately impeding with the reason why they're there, which is most often to remove a dangerous, criminal, illegal alien. So, I mean, notably, right? For instance, when the FBI is after someone, the general public doesn't know. And sure, the residents of the neighborhood might be able to see it, but, there's this degree of operating covertly, operating secretly. Look, I'm not an expert on it, but I would say whatever the FBI kind of does, you need to start applying those tactics and those strategies to ICE agents, right? Again, no reason. Got to figure it out. We have a lot of funding now, right, under Big Beautiful Bill and all that. Okay. Figure out a way for ICE to be able to operate without these liberals and these random people in group chats, right? Knowing where they are and being able to chase them around the city. And as I put here, right? I mean, the U.S. government's able to go into foreign countries and figure out exactly where a terrorist is living and, operate and conduct the capture or the strike, whatever they need to do. If that infrastructure is now necessary domestically in America to find where illegals are without basically anyone else knowing, then look, the left wing can use a civil libertarian argument all they want, but that's the point where we're at, right? Where, again, if you want these situations to stop happening, then the strategies of ICE need to get more sophisticated. Absolutely, that's true. As I put here as well, we also, honestly, at this point, should stop targeting one city at a time. right? Because that's kind of been the strategy thus far. Okay, it's known this month ICE is going to Los Angeles, then they're going to Charlotte. Hey, they're going to go to Minneapolis. All that needs to end, right? Because why is that? Because when liberals know, first of all, ICE is coming to the city, right? We publicly announce it. And by the way, they spend several weeks there. What does that do? That gives them way too much time to organize all of this activity, and that's how the situation escalates, right? The longer ICE and Border Patrol stay in a city known to the public, the longer that leftists are going to organize more and more. So what do we need to do? Not announce beforehand where we're going, right? We need to spread out all over the country, essentially, and basically keep this element of surprise and unpredictability. And by the way, I understand it's going to take time, but under Big Beautiful Bill, ICE and DHS is basically going to get the funding of a major world military. You absolutely should be able to use that money to spread out the manpower all around America to where, hey, one day ICE did a major raid in Los Angeles. And then by the time leftists go out and immediately start protesting, the next day it's in Minneapolis. And basically you always keep them on their toes. There's an unpredictability. There's an element of surprise that, first of all, makes it harder for the illegal aliens to anticipate something. Because you have to imagine, right? Even if you're an illegal, hey, you hear ICE is coming to Minneapolis and you're in Minneapolis, you're probably going to leave. Keep that that element of surprise. But then secondly, as it pertains to these left-wing agitators, you need to make a situation where Alex Pretti, Renee Good, any of these individuals can't find you to begin with. By the time they show up to the scene, you're already gone. Understand? Right? That needs to kind of be, I guess, the new philosophy here. Now, look, the problem with it, right, is probably going to be that leftists are going to say, oh, this is too authoritarian. Now you really are the secret police. What? You're using like spy infrastructure to figure out where, illegal aliens and criminal migrants actually are? This is such a far overreach. And look, don't get me wrong. I think probably it would be nicer in American society to have more quote unquote transparency. Hey, look, you can see what ICE is doing. You can see what the feds are up to. We know we can check it as citizens, etc. But here's the problem is that if you wanted transparency and now you're not going to have it, if, my kind of little approach to this actually were to come true, right, is that you guys brought it upon yourselves, right? The left brought this upon themselves. Because for 20 plus years, ICE was basically able to conduct normal operations and find illegal aliens without mobs of leftists trying to swarm them and engaging in a bunch of illegal behavior, right? Impeding law enforcement and the like. But essentially, and I've made this point before, what leftists do and have done honestly at many different points in history is they basically behave in a manner that's incompatible with actually living in an open or democratic society, and then cry victim when there's sort of a quote-unquote crackdown because, again, that's what they were doing, right? Whether that's engaging in political assassination or constantly impeding the enforcement of federal law or doing what they're doing with ICE agents, trying to run them over with cars, trying to pull guns on them, etc., right? Obviously, it's going to be necessary for the federal government to change tactics if this is how you're going to engage when we do it so publicly. Okay? So that's the situation that created it for me, right? So at that point, what choice do the feds actually have, right? They're going to have to adapt their tactics in some way, understanding, right, that your side of the political aisle loves to act like terrorists. You love to, engage in all this behavior where you think you're some type of like armed citizen resistance, but in reality, you're just a bunch of morons. Then that's what you got to do. So yeah, that's basically my solution to it, right? ICE has to stop acting like police, basically, and start more pretending as if, say, they're the CIA trying to conduct covert operations in a country in a foreign country with a bunch of hostile insurgents all around them, because that's basically what is indeed happening, right? And by the way, I think it would probably, frankly, be a lot more efficient, right? We'd be able to deport a lot more people, find more illegals, catch them by surprise if you sort of just spread out and did this very quietly and with extreme secrecy. And again, I understand the civil libertarian contentions that some people are going to have with that. I'm sure that's not exclusively going to be coming from left-wingers. But again, here's the problem, is that, just factually speaking, right? If you don't want society to become quote unquote authoritarian, then there needs to be a degree of social trust. As I said, right? Like left-wingers have to behave in a way that's compatible with a free, open, tolerant, democratic society. If you keep on pushing the bounds of that, right? Keep on engaging in terrorism, political assassinations at a certain point, right? the government and likewise different entities have to adapt their tactics to understanding, hey, this is the country, this is the society we are in now, right? So there's my answer, right? You don't want Alex Pretti, you don't want Renee Good, you don't want those situations to stop happening. That's how ICE has to change their tactics, you know? But what I will not accept is the answer of, oh, let's just stop. If you just stopped enforcing immigration law, then crazy left-wingers would stop trying to, commit acts of terrorism. No, that's not an acceptable response to me, right? So again, two options. Either really directly say, we're going to crack down on the left-wingers, or basically say, we're going to quietly figure out ways to evade them so where, they're not able to do this type of stuff. But definitely I agree, right? I think watching this situation, it's very clear that, the way ICE has been conducting their operations has to change. It cannot be the same going forward, but it cannot be the same going forward because, right, if you do it with this amount of transparency and openness, crazy left-wing mobs are going to swarm on you. That shouldn't be allowed to happen. And no, again, despite whatever temporary cooperation you're getting, frankly, you cannot trust the local law enforcement of Democrat states in particular to be doing that job for you. But now we need to adapt our tactics, right? This is what we're dealing with. So anyways, that said, you feel free to let me know your thoughts on that in the comment section down below. But that said, guys, be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.